Hello, this is Ruby from the Useful Journal. You may not have heard of the journal I'm reviewing today because it's new on the market in 2021. For those of you who don't think 160 GSM paper is quite thick enough, the Marie on Rose Journal by Torryn Marie has 180 GSM paper that really is the last stop before going to an art journal. Absolutely none of your water-based markers will show through the paper, and there was only very light ghosting with a Sharpie pen. I was attracted by the stunning artwork on the covers done by Torryn Marie herself. Currently, there is an Australian-themed cover, a Southeast Asian jungle-themed cover, and a plainer cover with a baby elephant, all in printed leatherette. I chose the Australian galahs. Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to be 100% positive about a newcomer that is offering something different, I have to say that despite its weight, the paper isn't suitable for watercolour, and when you use an eraser on the very smooth paper, it sometimes smears lead pencil on the page, and you can't lift it no matter how hard you try. It's okay if you're really careful. So, back to the beginning. You received the journal wrapped in pink bubble wrap and then pink tissue paper, and it's sealed with a very pretty washi tape, which I've since reused. The journal had a belly band and was shrink wrapped. There is no sleeve or box. The journal has an elastic closure, 2 ribbons that are already fraying after a bit of use, a pen loop, and no pocket for storing stickers and whatnot. There's an owner's page, and otherwise there's no other markings apart from the dot grid, including no page numbers. The dot grid is 27 by 40 dots. The dots, like in most journals I've seen, aren't perfectly aligned across the pages, varying by up to 1 millimetre. This won't be too much of a problem though, because more significantly, the dots are so pale I sometimes struggle to see the line I'm meant to be writing along. While the journal feels well constructed externally, it really bugs me that the pages where the stitching for the binding comes through are often glued together, and if you want the page to sit flat, you have to tear the pages away from the stitching. The pages otherwise sit flat, so it seems to be a manufacturing fault where glue is allowed to seep through the stitching. I know this isn't a one-off because the first journal was faulty. The printing machinery had been dirty, I'd say after having been re-inked, and so Torryn very kindly sent me a replacement journal, and both have had the same problem with the stitching. Torryn's customer service was excellent, by the way. The journal weighs 540 grams and is a bit thicker because the cover is slightly padded under the leatherette. Moving on to the paper. As I mentioned, it's 180 GSM, which is cardstock. Ghosting will be a distant memory for you as long as you don't use alcohol-based markers. The paper is very smooth, the smoothest I've tried, but this is potentially its downfall. While you can highlight before writing without problems, I tried using a highlighter 10 seconds after writing and got visible smearing. And this agreed with the smear test, which showed that it takes 12 seconds or more for a Pigma Micron ink to dry. Interestingly, I get smear from using an eraser sometimes, and on some pages I wasn't able to remove the eraser smudges. This sometimes happens on other paper when trying to remove coloured pencils, but I've never come across it before for lead pencil. As I mentioned earlier, the dots are pale, concealed with an N60 Tombow, which is below average. I find it difficult to see the dots when I'm drawing or writing across the page. Could be my old eyes, but some people may like this feature because the dots aren't noticeable at all in your final artwork. The paper's tendency to allow inks to smear is probably linked to the results with watercolour. The 180 GSM paper doesn't make it better for watercolour. There's a similar amount of page wrinkle to a 160 GSM journal, and while there's no bleed through from using like a wet on wet technique, the paint behaves really strangely and the resulting painting looks really flat. I think what is going on is the paint soaking in too fast and not allowing you to blend. That said, this is not watercolour paper and isn't sold as watercolour friendly. I just don't want you to buy it thinking it will be fine because the paper is so thick. If all you do with your watercolours though is colour in or paint blobs or splash dots on your page, the journal will do fine. Overall, I have mixed feelings. I love the look of the journal and I actually like almost everything about the paper except the fact that my eraser smears and can't be removed. It's at the pricey end of the scale, similar to an Archer and Olive, and at this price I expect a high standard. So I hope the few faults I've identified are resolved, as otherwise it's a lovely journal. Happy journaling!